What did Japan's top admiral secretly fear about attacking Pearl Harbor? Admiral Yamamoto studied America's power firsthand and warned his government. Striking the sleeping giant would bring catastrophic consequences. Yet military leaders, blinded by desperation for resources and underestimating American resolve, pushed forward anyway. Yamamoto predicted Japan had only 6 months before disaster struck. One critical mistake turned the attack into a unifying rallying cry for America. Most commanders believed Americans were too soft to fight back, but Yamamoto's darkest fear came true almost exactly on schedule. Before we dive in, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, what time it is for you right now, and what fascinates you most about World War II history. The man who knew too much. December 7, 1941, Japanese forces launched a surprise strike on Pearl Harbor. But behind the scenes, one man saw the future, and it terrified him. Admiral Yamamoto was the mastermind behind the entire operation, yet he didn't want this war. Why would the architect of Japan's greatest military strike secretly oppose his own plan? Yamamoto had spent years living in America. He studied at Harvard. He walked the streets of Washington, D.C. He saw firsthand what most Japanese commanders refused to believe: America's factories, its endless resources, its powerful economy. He knew Japan was picking a fight it couldn't finish. While other leaders celebrated their bold strategy, Yamamoto sat in silence, gripping a terrible secret. He believed this attack would lead Japan to total destruction. His warnings were ignored, his predictions dismissed, but deep down he knew exactly what was coming, and the clock was already ticking. What did Yamamoto predict would happen in just 6 months? Initial reluctance. Yamamoto didn't just have doubts, he fought against the war entirely. In private meetings with Japan's top political and military leaders, he spoke bluntly. "We cannot win a long war with America," he warned. He explained America's industrial strength, its ability to build ships faster than Japan could sink them. He begged them to reconsider. But Japan was desperate. The country needed oil, rubber, and steel. America had cut off these vital supplies through trade restrictions. Japanese leaders believed they had no choice but to strike first and seize resource-rich territories in Southeast Asia. Yamamoto was overruled. Military factions hungry for expansion pushed the plan forward. Political leaders sided with aggression over caution. Yamamoto was trapped. As Japan's most brilliant naval strategist, he was ordered to design the attack he opposed. So he did, but with a heavy heart. He knew he was building a plan that would ultimately destroy his own nation. But if Yamamoto hated this plan, why did he create it so perfectly? The sleeping giant quote. After Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto reportedly said something chilling. "I fear all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with a terrible resolve." Historians debate whether he actually said these exact words. Some think it was added later in films and books, but whether he spoke them aloud or not, the quote perfectly captures what Yamamoto truly believed. He understood the American spirit in a way his fellow commanders did not. He knew that Americans, when pushed, would not surrender. They would fight back harder. Japan's strategy relied on one assumption, that America would be shocked into giving up. Yamamoto knew better. He had seen American determination, their pride, their refusal to accept defeat. The attack wasn't going to scare America into peace, it was going to unite them in anger. And once that sleeping giant woke up, Yamamoto believed Japan would face an enemy it could never overcome. So, how long did Yamamoto think Japan could survive?
Yamamoto made a bold, specific prediction. He told Japan's leaders, "If we attack Pearl Harbor, I can guarantee victories for 6 months, maybe 1 year. After that, I have no confidence." 6 months to a year, that was Japan's window. Yamamoto wasn't being pessimistic, he was being realistic. He calculated how long it would take America to recover, rebuild, and strike back with full force. Japanese leaders ignored this warning. They believed their superior training, discipline, and willpower would carry them to victory. Yamamoto knew better. And his prediction turned out to be disturbingly accurate. Almost exactly 6 months after Pearl Harbor, American forces met the Japanese fleet at the Battle of Midway. It was a turning point. Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers in a single day. Their momentum shattered, their brief window slammed shut. Yamamoto's timeline had come true. The war he never wanted had begun spiraling out of control right on schedule. But there was another mistake that made everything worse. Late declaration of war. Yamamoto wanted the attack to be clean, honorable. According to international law, Japan was supposed to deliver a formal declaration of war before attacking. The plan was to hand the message to American officials exactly 30 minutes before the first bombs dropped. But something went wrong. The Japanese embassy in Washington took too long to decode and type the message. By the time it reached U.S. officials, Pearl Harbor was already under attack. Yamamoto was horrified. This wasn't just a military miscalculation, it was a moral disaster. The attack was now seen as a sneak attack, a betrayal. Americans didn't just see it as an act of war, they saw it as cowardly and dishonorable. The delay turned Pearl Harbor into a rallying cry. "Remember Pearl Harbor" became the slogan that united an entire nation. Yamamoto knew this mistake had made his worst fears even worse. America wasn't just angry, they were furious. But while Yamamoto worried, other commanders felt confident. Why? Focus on a quick victory. Most Japanese commanders didn't share Yamamoto's fears. They had a different strategy: hit hard, hit fast, and win before America could recover. Their plan was simple: strike the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor and cripple it. While America struggled to rebuild, Japan would sweep through Southeast Asia. They'd seize oil fields in the Dutch East Indies, rubber plantations in Malaya, rice supplies in Indochina. With these resources secured, Japan would build a defensive wall across the Pacific. American forces would have to fight through thousands of miles of fortified islands just to reach Japan. The commanders believed this would be too costly, too slow, and too bloody for America to accept. They were gambling on speed. They believed one devastating blow would buy them the time they needed to become unstoppable. But they were wrong about one critical thing. They misunderstood what would happen after those early victories. Negotiated peace hope. Japanese leaders weren't planning to conquer America. They knew that was impossible. Instead, they were hoping for something else: a negotiated peace. Their strategy relied on American war exhaustion. Here's what they expected. Japan wins early battles with high American losses. The U.S. public, shocked by heavy losses, loses the will to fight. America offers a peace deal letting Japan keep its new territories. Japan celebrates victory and secures its empire. This wasn't a wild fantasy. It had worked before. In the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, Japan delivered early victories and Russia agreed to peace terms. Japanese commanders believed history would repeat itself. But they made a fatal miscalculation. They assumed Americans were soft, comfortable, unwilling to sacrifice for a prolonged war. They didn't understand American culture. Americans don't quit when hit, they fight harder. Pearl Harbor didn't break American resolve, it forged it into steel. But why were Japanese commanders so confident Americans wouldn't fight back?
Dismissal of concerns. Some Japanese analysts did warn about America's industrial power. They pointed to U.S. factories, shipyards, and oil production. They showed reports of America's economic strength. But these warnings were dismissed. Why? Because Japan felt it had no choice.
Every month Japan waited, the American fleet grew stronger. New battleships were being built. Aircraft carriers were launching. If Japan didn't strike now, the window would close forever. Japanese commanders convinced themselves that America's strength didn't matter if they never got the chance to use it. Destroy the fleet at Pearl Harbor and America would be paralyzed. Seize the resources quickly and Japan would have everything it needed to match American production. It was a gamble, a desperate all-or-nothing bet, and the commanders pushing hardest for war believed their fighting spirit would overcome America's material advantages. Yamamoto knew this was wishful thinking, but he was outvoted. So what happened when Yamamoto's predictions started coming true? The turning point at Midway. 6 months after Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto's nightmare became reality. In June 1942, Japanese and American forces clashed at the Battle of Midway. Japan sent 4 of its best aircraft carriers. They expected another easy victory. Instead, they sailed into a trap. American codebreakers had cracked Japan's secret messages. They knew exactly where the Japanese fleet would be. In one devastating day, all 4 Japanese carriers were destroyed. Japan's offensive power was shattered. The brief window Yamamoto predicted was now closed. Japan would never recover from this loss. From this point forward, America pushed Japan back, island by island, mile by mile. Yamamoto had been right all along. His 6-month prediction was almost exact. The sleeping giant had awakened, and now there was no stopping it. Japan's gamble had failed, and the war Yamamoto never wanted had become the disaster he always feared. So what can we learn from the commanders who saw the truth and those who refused to listen? The legacy of ignored warnings. The story of Pearl Harbor isn't just about a surprise attack. It's about what happens when leaders ignore the truth. Yamamoto saw the future clearly. He understood America's strength, its resolve, its industrial power. He warned his government. He predicted the timeline. He was right about everything, but he was ignored. Other commanders, driven by desperation and overconfidence, chose to believe what they wanted to believe. They gambled on a quick victory. They assumed America would give up. They were catastrophically wrong. The attack on Pearl Harbor didn't break America. It united the nation like never before. Japan's brief window closed exactly when Yamamoto said it would. The war he opposed became the disaster he always feared. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't in fighting, it's in admitting when a fight can't be won. The Pearl Harbor failure wasn't in the attack itself, it was in ignoring the truth. Japanese commanders' reactions split between Yamamoto's grim realism and others' false confidence. Yamamoto's 6-month prediction proved tragically accurate at Midway. While some believed Americans were too soft to fight, Yamamoto understood the sleeping giant would awaken with unstoppable resolve. His warnings were dismissed, his timeline was ignored, but history proved him right. Sometimes the wisest voice is the one no one wants to hear. What do you think? Could this disaster have been avoided?